The spark of consequence. It was an early morning flight from New York to Los Angeles, one of those bustling routes where every seat seemed filled with a mix of business people, vacationing families, and the occasional celebrity. The cabin crew, as always, moved with practiced efficiency, handling requests with calm smiles. Among the passengers in first class was Barron Kingston, a reserved teenager and the son of a renowned business tycoon and former political figure. Known for his polite demeanor, he had blended into the first-class crowd, attracting little attention. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Barron put down his tablet and pressed the call button. He had been reading for hours and wanted nothing more than a simple bottle of water to quench his thirst. A flight attendant named Melinda Walker approached him, her face betraying none of the fatigue she felt from back-to-back shifts. "Yes?" she asked curtly, her voice clipped but professional. "May I have some water, please?" Barron asked, his tone polite and composed. Melinda glanced toward the galley and then back at him. "We're not serving beverages right now. You'll have to wait until the next service round." The response was abrupt, but Barron didn't react. Instead, he nodded and replied, "Understood. Thank you." Melinda moved on, but her tone had caught the attention of several passengers nearby. A murmur spread through the cabin as a few recognized who the young man was. "That's Barron Kingston," someone whispered. "Did she just refuse him water?" While Barron remained calm, a nearby passenger flagged another flight attendant. The senior attendant, Clara Peterson, was a seasoned professional who immediately sensed the rising tension. She approached Barron and asked softly, "Is everything all right, sir?" "I just asked for some water," Barron replied, shrugging lightly. "But I was told I needed to wait." Clara's brow furrowed. Water was a basic request, one that should never be refused, especially in first class. Without hesitation, she retrieved a bottle from the galley and brought it to him. "Here you go, sir. My apologies for the delay," Clara said, her tone warm and accommodating. "Thank you," Barron replied with a small smile, taking the bottle. Clara moved swiftly to the back of the plane, her professional facade masking the growing unease in her chest. She found Melinda standing near the galley, preparing snacks for the next service round. "Melinda," Clara began in a low, controlled voice, "did you deny water to the young man in seat 1A?" Melinda turned, her expression neutral. "I told him we weren't serving beverages yet. It's procedure, isn't it?" "Melinda," Clara said sharply, "water is a basic necessity. You can't refuse a passenger, especially one in first class. And that's Barron Kingston. Do you realize who he is?" Melinda's expression tightened. "I don't care who he is. We have policies, and I was following them." Clara inhaled deeply, trying to maintain her composure. "This isn't just about policies. It's about judgment and service. I need to report this to the captain." Melinda's face paled. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" Clara countered. "Passengers noticed, Melinda. This isn't something we can brush under the rug." The intercom crackled as the captain's voice came through. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor delay due to operational concerns. We appreciate your patience and understanding." Unbeknownst to the passengers, the operational concern was rapidly escalating behind the scenes. Clara had briefed the captain, who in turn notified ground control and the airline's corporate office. Within minutes, messages were flying between the airline's management team, detailing the incident. The decision was swift. Melinda Walker's behavior was deemed unacceptable. An order came down to remove her from duty upon landing. As the plane soared high above the clouds, Melinda remained unaware of the storm brewing beneath her feet. She continued her duties, her expression calm, though whispers among the crew hinted at trouble. When the plane finally touched down in Los Angeles, the passengers disembarked, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the background. Melinda was called aside as security personnel quietly escorted her to a private room in the terminal. The airline's management team delivered the verdict. Effective immediately, her employment was terminated. Stunned, Melinda protested. "This is ridiculous. I followed protocol. I didn't do anything wrong." The HR representative remained firm. "Melinda, denying a basic request like water, especially to a high-profile passenger, violates our service standards. This incident has damaged the airline's reputation. We cannot overlook it." By the time the meeting concluded, Melinda's world had unraveled. One small decision, made in a fleeting moment, had cost her everything. Meanwhile, Barron Kingston left the airport quietly, unaware of the full extent of the fallout. To him, the incident had been a minor inconvenience, hardly worth remembering. But for Melinda, it marked the beginning of a personal and professional crisis that would challenge her in ways she never imagined. The plane was silent again, but the consequences of that single decision would echo long after the flight had ended. The lesson, harsh and unyielding, was clear. In the world of customer service, even the smallest misstep could set off a chain reaction no one could predict. The spiral begins. Melinda Walker sat in the cold, nondescript room at the airline's Los Angeles headquarters, staring blankly at the termination documents before her. The HR representative across the table wore a carefully neutral expression, but Melinda could sense the judgment behind their tone. "Melinda," the representative said, folding their hands, "this isn't personal. It's about maintaining the airline's reputation. We serve thousands of passengers daily, and any negative incident, especially involving high-profile individuals, has significant consequences." Melinda's throat felt tight as she struggled to keep her composure. "I wasn't being malicious. I just followed protocol. We weren't serving drinks at the time. How was I supposed to know who he was?" "Whether or not you knew who he was doesn't matter," the representative replied coolly. "What matters is how your decision was perceived. That's the reality of this industry." Reality. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Melinda signed the papers with trembling hands and was quietly escorted out of the building. The weight of the moment pressed down on her like an avalanche, but it wasn't until she stepped out into the bustling chaos of the airport terminal that the enormity of her situation truly hit her. She was unemployed. Her career, one she had built over 10 grueling years, was over. And it had happened so fast, so decisively, that she hadn't even had time to fight for herself. As Melinda sat in the back of a rideshare vehicle, heading home, her mind raced. The whispers among the passengers on the flight, Clara's disapproving gaze, the captain's calm but ominous announcement, all of it replayed in a relentless loop. How could one moment, one seemingly minor decision, have led to this? By the time she reached her apartment, Melinda was emotionally drained. She sank onto the couch, her uniform still pristine, but now utterly meaningless. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from a coworker. "Heard what happened. Are you okay?" Melinda stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. She didn't feel okay. She felt humiliated, blindsided, and increasingly resentful. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been made a scapegoat. Was this really about her decision to deny water, or had the airline been looking for someone to blame in a PR storm? With a deep breath, Melinda typed back, "I'll be fine. Thanks for asking." The lie tasted bitter, but she couldn't bear the thought of appearing weak. The next morning, the headlines hit. Flight attendant fired after denying water to Barron Kingston. Melinda's heart sank as she skimmed through the article. The story had gone viral. News outlets framed it as a colossal blunder by an airline employee, with some sensationalizing the details for maximum clicks. Social media exploded with opinions. Some commenters were sympathetic, criticizing the airline for its harsh response. Others were less kind, calling Melinda's actions unprofessional and claiming she deserved to be fired. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and powerless to control the narrative. Her name was now linked to this incident, and it seemed everyone had an opinion. Scrolling through the comments, Melinda noticed one that stung more than the others. How does someone like this even get hired in the first place? No wonder she's out of a job. Tears welled in her eyes. She had always taken pride in her work. navigating the challenges of a high-pressure job with grace and dedication. But none of that mattered now. She was being judged by strangers who knew nothing about her, based on one isolated moment. Determined to salvage her reputation, Melinda decided to reach out to the airline's management. She composed an email, carefully explaining her side of the story and requesting a formal meeting to discuss the situation. Dear Management, I am writing to express my concerns regarding my recent termination. While I understand the importance of maintaining high standards in customer service, I believe the decision to terminate my employment was disproportionate to the situation. I followed standard protocol regarding beverage service and was unaware of the passenger's identity. I request an opportunity to meet and clarify any misunderstandings. She hit send and waited, though deep down, she doubted it would make a difference. The airline had already moved on, focused on damage control and protecting its brand. Over the next few days, Melinda tried to distract herself with routine tasks, cleaning her apartment, updating her resume, and applying for jobs. But every time she opened her laptop, the headlines and social media posts haunted her. The story had become a trending topic, with commentators debating everything from her professionalism to the broader implications of customer service standards in high-pressure industries. Friends and family reached out, offering their support, but even their encouragement felt hollow. This will blow over, they said. People will forget. Would they? Melinda wasn't so sure. The airline industry was a small world, and reputations had a way of sticking. Every time she submitted a job application, she feared her name would trigger recognition and rejection. Meanwhile, Barron Kingston remained largely silent about the incident. His family, known for their ability to navigate the media, issued a brief statement. We trust the airline to handle this matter appropriately. Barron holds no ill will toward the employee involved. But the statement did little to quell the growing public discourse. If anything, it fueled speculation about whether Melinda had been treated fairly. Some pointed out that Barron's calm demeanor during the incident suggested he hadn't been particularly offended. Others argued that the airline's response was more about optics than justice. By the end of the week, Melinda received a reply from the airline's HR department. Dear Ms. Walker, thank you for reaching out. While we understand your concerns, our decision was made after careful consideration and consultation with senior management. We stand by our commitment to providing exceptional service and maintaining our brand reputation. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Melinda read the email twice, her stomach sinking. The door was firmly shut. As the weeks dragged on, the reality of her situation became impossible to ignore. Interviews were scarce, and when she did secure one, the same question inevitably arose. Can you explain what happened during your time at the airline? No matter how tactfully she tried to frame it, the stigma of the incident overshadowed her qualifications. Employers saw her as a liability, someone who had failed under pressure. Melinda began to wonder if her career in the airline industry was over. The thought filled her with despair. She had worked so hard to build a life she was proud of, only to see it unravel in a matter of minutes. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Melinda realized she had two choices: let this moment define her, or find a way to rise above it. Rising from the ashes, Melinda Walker stared at her laptop screen, the cursor blinking in the empty objective field of yet another job application. It felt like a cruel metaphor for her life. Paused, uncertain, and devoid of direction. She had always prided herself on her adaptability and resilience, but as the days turned into weeks, her confidence wavered. Her savings were dwindling faster than she had anticipated. Rent, bills, and groceries loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. The job market was brutal, and the scarlet letter of her dismissal from the airline followed her like a shadow. Each rejection email was a dagger to her self-esteem, a reminder that her career had been reduced to a viral headline and a string of online debates. Desperate for stability, Melinda began applying for positions far removed from her previous work: retail stores, call centers, and even a diner near her apartment. She wasn't above starting over, But even in these simpler roles, the questions about her past persisted. "Aren't you the flight attendant from that news story?" A manager at a boutique had asked during an interview, her tone more curious than accusatory. "Yes," Melinda had replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "But on more than that one moment." The manager had nodded, but the rejection email came the next day. By the third month of her job hunt, Melinda hit a low point. She had spent hours scrolling through social media, torturing herself with the endless discussions about her incident. She came across a video titled, "The Cost of Perfection in Customer Service." Curious, she clicked on it. The video wasn't about her directly, but it might as well have been. It discussed the unrealistic expectations placed on service workers, the lack of room for error, and the growing trend of public shaming for minor mistakes. As the narrator spoke, Melinda felt an odd mix of anger and validation. It wasn't just her. This was a systemic problem. For the first time since her dismissal, she felt a flicker of purpose. Maybe, just maybe, she could use her experience to spark change. Melinda decided to channel her frustration into something productive. She started writing a blog, tentatively titled "Behind the Uniform: The Human Side of Service." Her first post was raw and unfiltered. "I was a flight attendant for 10 years. I loved my job. I loved helping people, ensuring they had a safe and comfortable journey. But one mistake, a single moment of poor judgment, cost me everything." This blog isn't about excuses. It's about exploring the pressures we face in customer service and why perfection shouldn't be the only measure of our worth. To her surprise, the post resonated. Comments poured in from other service workers who shared similar stories: bartenders, hotel clerks, retail associates. They all echoed the same sentiment. The expectation of perfection was crushing, and the consequences of failure were often disproportionate. Encouraged by the response, Melinda wrote more. She shared stories from her years as a flight attendant, both the highs and the lows. She talked about the joy of helping a nervous flyer through their first trip, the exhaustion of long-haul flights, and yes, the incident with Barron Kingston. Her honesty struck a chord. Within weeks, her blog gained traction. Service workers and even some corporate professionals began sharing her posts. The discussions she had once dreaded were now being reframed. People weren't judging her. They were empathizing with her. One morning, as Melinda sifted through her inbox, she noticed an email from a small online magazine. The subject line read, "We'd love to feature your story." She hesitated before opening it. The media had not been kind to her in the past, and she was wary of being misrepresented again. But as she read the email, her apprehension faded. The magazine wasn't interested in sensationalizing her story. They wanted her perspective on the broader issues in customer service. After a lengthy phone interview, the article was published under the title, "Life After the Uniform." A former flight attendant speaks out. The piece was balanced and thoughtful, highlighting not just Melinda's experience, but also the systemic flaws in the industry. It quickly went viral, but this time, the narrative was different. Instead of being vilified, Melinda was being celebrated for her courage in speaking out. As her platform grew, opportunities began to trickle in. A nonprofit organization that advocated for workers' rights reached out, inviting her to speak at a conference. Melinda was hesitant at first. Public speaking wasn't her forte, but the organization assured her that her voice was important. On the day of the conference, Melinda stood backstage, her palms clammy and her heart racing. She clutched a stack of note cards, though she knew she wouldn't use them. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding her momentarily. She began tentatively, her voice shaky. "When I was fired from my job as a flight attendant, I thought my life was over. I thought I was defined by that one moment. But what I've learned is that failure isn't the end. It's an opportunity to grow and to push for change." As she spoke, the fear melted away. She saw nods of understanding in the audience, heard murmurs of agreement. By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause. For the first time in months, Melinda felt like she had regained control of her narrative. The months that followed were transformative. Melinda began consulting with companies, helping them develop training programs that balanced high service standards with compassion for employees. Her blog became a hub for discussions about workplace fairness, and she even started a podcast where she interviewed other service workers about their experiences. Ironically, it was Barron Kingston who provided the final piece of closure. One day, Melinda received an email from his assistant. "Dear Ms. Walker, Barron Kingston recently came across your blog and was deeply moved by your story. He would like to meet with you to discuss ways he can support your advocacy efforts. Please let us know if you are available." Melinda stared at the screen, her emotions a whirlwind of surprise, gratitude, and trepidation. After a moment, she typed her response. "I would be honored." When they finally met, Barron was as composed and polite as she remembered. Over coffee in a quiet corner of a Manhattan cafe, he listened intently as Melinda shared her journey. "I never wanted anyone to lose their job over what happened," Barron said earnestly. "I didn't realize how much it escalated." "It wasn't your fault," Melinda replied. "It was the system, but I'm trying to change that now." Barron smiled. "Then let me help." That conversation marked the beginning of a surprising partnership. With Barron's resources and Melinda's vision, they launched a campaign to advocate for fair treatment of service workers. The campaign gained national attention, sparking conversations in boardrooms and break rooms alike. Melinda's life had come full circle. What had once felt like the end was now a new beginning. She wasn't just the flight attendant who made a mistake. She was an advocate, a voice for change, and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. A new mission. The campaign launched by Melinda Walker and Barron Kingston quickly became a beacon of hope for service workers across the country. Titled Humanity in Service, the initiative focused on improving workplace conditions, fostering empathy between employees and customers, and pushing for reforms in industries where perfection was often demanded without understanding the toll it took on workers. The initial response was overwhelmingly positive. Service workers from all walks of life began sharing their stories, many of them eerily similar to Melinda's. Bartenders talked about being berated for minor errors. Retail associates recounted shifts where they were expected to handle impossible workloads, and customer service representatives shared tales of abuse that left them emotionally drained. For the first time in her life, Melinda felt a sense of purpose that extended beyond her own struggles. She wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was helping others do the same. The campaign took off in ways neither Melinda nor Barron could have anticipated. Within weeks, their social media accounts were flooded with messages of support and testimonials. A video Melinda recorded, sharing her story and the vision for the campaign, went viral, garnering millions of views. "This isn't just about me," Melinda said in the video, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's about every worker who's been told they're not good enough because of one mistake. It's about creating a world where people are valued for their humanity, not just their ability to perform flawlessly under impossible circumstances." The video struck a chord. Soon, news outlets picked up the story, framing Melinda as a symbol of resilience and advocacy. Interviews followed, with Melinda appearing on morning shows, podcasts, and even a few late-night talk shows. While she was nervous at first, she quickly found her stride, speaking candidly about her experiences and the systemic issues she hoped to address. Barron, true to his word, used his influence and resources to propel the campaign forward. He connected Melinda with high-profile allies, including industry leaders, labor advocates, and even a few lawmakers who were interested in pushing for legislative changes to protect workers in high-stress industries. One of their first victories was securing a partnership with a major airline. The airline, recognizing the growing public support for the campaign, agreed to implement new training programs that emphasized empathy and conflict resolution. They also introduced an employee support hotline, allowing staff to report unfair treatment or seek guidance without fear of retaliation. It was a small step, but it felt monumental to Melinda. For the first time, she saw tangible proof that change was possible. As the campaign grew, so did the challenges. Not everyone supported their mission. Critics accused Melinda of playing the victim and questioned whether her dismissal had been justified after all. Some business leaders pushed back, claiming that holding workers accountable was essential to maintaining high service standards. Empathy is important, one CEO argued in a televised debate, but so is discipline. If we excuse every mistake, where do we draw the line? Melinda held her ground. This isn't about excusing mistakes, she countered. It's about recognizing that workers are human. Perfection shouldn't be the standard. It should be the goal we strive for together, with understanding and support. The debate was heated, but Melinda's calm, articulate responses won over many viewers. Still, the backlash weighed on her. Late at night, when the cameras were off and the emails stopped coming, she found herself questioning whether she was truly making a difference or simply painting a target on her back. One particularly difficult day, Melinda received an unexpected email from Clara Peterson, the senior flight attendant who had been involved in the incident that led to her dismissal. Subject: proud of you. Hi Melinda. I just wanted to reach out and say how proud I am of what you're doing. I've been following your campaign, and it's inspiring to see you turn such a difficult situation into something positive. I wish I had stood up for you more back then. You deserved better, and I'm sorry I didn't do more. If there's ever a way I can help, please let me know. Melinda read the email twice, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. Clara's support meant more to her than she had expected. She replied immediately, thanking Clara and inviting her to join the campaign. A week later, Clara appeared at a panel discussion organized by Humanity in Service. Her first-hand account of the pressures flight attendants faced added a powerful dimension to the conversation. Together, she and Melinda began advocating for systemic changes within the airline industry, from better training to mental health support for employees. As the months passed, Humanity in Service evolved into more than just a campaign. It became a movement. They organized town halls, brought together workers and employers for honest discussions, and even launched a scholarship fund to help service workers pursue further education or career changes. Melinda's life, once defined by a single mistake, was now defined by purpose and possibility. She no longer felt the weight of her dismissal as a burden. It was a catalyst, a turning point that had led her to something greater. One evening, after a particularly successful event, Barron and Melinda sat in a quiet corner of a hotel lobby, reflecting on their journey. "You've come a long way," Barron said, raising a glass of sparkling water. "I knew you'd make a difference, but this is incredible." Melinda smiled, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, and honestly, I'm still figuring it all out. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be." Barron raised his glass higher. "To second chances and making the most of them." "To second chances," Melinda echoed, clinking her glass against his. In that moment, she realized she had finally reclaimed her story. The fight for lasting change. The success of Humanity in Service was undeniable, but with that success came new challenges. As the movement grew, so did the complexity of its mission. What began as a campaign to advocate for service workers' dignity had morphed into a full-fledged call for systemic change across industries. While Melinda Walker relished the momentum, she also felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. One morning, as Melinda sat at her desk sifting through emails, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from a major news outlet. They had published an investigative report inspired by the campaign, exposing the harsh working conditions in a well-known retail chain. "Abuse on the floor, the human cost of perfection," the headline read. The article detailed stories of workers pressured into grueling shifts, denied breaks, and berated for small mistakes. Melinda recognized the pain in their words. It mirrored her own experiences. She shared the article on the campaign's social media pages, adding her own caption, "This is why we fight. No one should have to sacrifice their humanity for their paycheck." The post went viral within hours, sparking debates online and forcing the retail chain's executives to issue a statement promising to review their policies. While the media attention boosted the campaign's visibility, it also attracted critics. Business leaders accused Melinda of unfairly vilifying entire industries, while some workers worried the focus on high-profile cases overshadowed everyday struggles. At a town hall event in Chicago, a middle-aged waiter stood up during the Q&A session. "I've been doing this job for 20 years, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "It's not perfect, but it's honest work. Are you saying my managers are the bad guys just because they expect me to do my job right?" Melinda stepped forward, her heart heavy with the man's frustration. "Not at all," she said gently. "This isn't about blaming individuals. It's about creating systems where people like you, dedicated, hard-working professionals, are supported, not punished for being human. It's about ensuring fairness, understanding, and respect in every workplace." Her response earned applause, but the exchange stayed with her. She realized the movement needed to strike a balance between holding companies accountable and celebrating the resilience of the workers themselves. Determined to refine their message, Melinda and her team launched a new initiative within the campaign, Stories of Strength. This series spotlighted workers who had overcome adversity, highlighting their dedication and the ways they navigated challenges with grace. One story featured a young nurse who had worked double shifts during the pandemic, balancing patient care with her own mental health struggles. Another showcased a janitor who had saved money for years to send his daughter to college while maintaining impeccable standards at his job. These stories resonated deeply with audiences, painting a fuller picture of the service industry, not just its flaws, but the humanity at its core. Behind the scenes, Melinda's partnership with Barron Kingston continued to thrive. They held strategy meetings in bustling offices, quiet cafes, and sometimes even on long walks through Central Park. Despite his reserved nature, Barron had become a fierce advocate for the campaign, using his connections to bring influential voices to the table. During one such meeting, Barron suggested a bold idea: a congressional hearing to address the systemic issues facing service workers. Melinda blinked in surprise. "A hearing? Do you think we're ready for that?" "I think the country is ready for it," Barron replied. "And you're the perfect person to lead the charge." The thought of speaking in front of lawmakers terrified Melinda, but she knew Barron was right. If they wanted real, lasting change, they needed to take their fight to the highest levels of power. The weeks leading up to the hearing were a whirlwind of preparation. Melinda's team gathered data, compiled worker testimonials, and crafted a compelling argument. Clara Peterson, the senior flight attendant who had become one of Melinda's closest allies, played a pivotal role in organizing the effort. On the day of the hearing, Melinda found herself seated at a long wooden table in a grand room, filled with cameras, reporters, and lawmakers. The atmosphere was tense, but she took a deep breath, grounding herself in the knowledge that she was there for a reason. When her name was called, Melinda rose and walked to the microphone. She glanced at the notes in front of her, but decided to speak from the heart. "Good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Melinda Walker, and I am a former flight attendant who lost her job because of a single moment of poor judgment. But this isn't just about me. It's about the countless workers who face impossible expectations every day, often without the support they need to succeed." Her voice grew steadier as she continued, weaving statistics with personal anecdotes, painting a vivid picture of the systemic flaws that left workers vulnerable. She spoke of the need for fair labor practices, better training programs, and a cultural shift that valued empathy over punishment. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Lawmakers asked thoughtful questions, and by the end of the day, several pledged to introduce legislation aimed at improving workplace conditions. The hearing marked a turning point for humanity in service. It wasn't just a movement anymore. It was a catalyst for real change. Companies began reaching out, not to deflect criticism, but to seek guidance on how they could improve. Workers reported feeling empowered to speak up about injustices without fear of retaliation. For Melinda, the transformation was bittersweet. She couldn't erase the pain of her dismissal or the struggles that followed, but she could see how that pain had paved the way for something greater. One night, after a long day of meetings, Melinda sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through the latest testimonials on the campaign's website. One post caught her eye. "Dear Melinda, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to thank you. I'm a waitress in a small diner, and last week I had a customer yell at me for forgetting his order. Normally, I would have gone home feeling worthless, but then I thought of you. I reminded myself that I'm human and I'm doing my best. Your story gave me the courage to hold my head high. Thank you." Tears filled Melinda's eyes as she read the words. For the first time, she felt the full weight of what she had accomplished, not just for herself, but for countless others who needed to know they weren't alone. She closed her laptop and looked out the window, the city lights shimmering like a promise. Her journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace with where it was leading. Melinda's testimony before Congress didn't just garner applause. It ignited a firestorm of national conversation. The hearing became a trending topic on every major platform, with hashtags like #HumanityInService and #WorkersFirst gaining traction across the globe. News networks dissected her words, panels debated the issues, and workers from industries beyond customer service began to echo her message. That evening, as Melinda watched the coverage unfold, she felt a mix of pride and apprehension. The spotlight was brighter than ever, and with it came the pressure to deliver on the promises her movement had inspired. The corporate backlash. The following week, Melinda faced a new wave of resistance. While many companies supported the campaign, others saw it as a threat to their bottom line. Executives from major corporations, especially those in the service and retail industries, began lobbying against proposed labor reforms. They painted humanity in service as an overreach, a movement that would stifle efficiency and inflate costs. One op-ed in a prominent business journal accused Melinda of vilifying corporate success and pushing a dangerous narrative that rewards mediocrity. The article stung, not because it criticized her, but because it distorted the movement's message. Melinda gathered her team for an emergency strategy meeting. "We can't let them control the narrative," she said, her voice firm. "This isn't about punishing businesses. It's about creating environments where workers and companies thrive together." Her team brainstormed countermeasures. They decided to release a series of videos featuring testimonials from both workers and supportive employers. These videos highlighted businesses that had embraced the campaign's principles and seen tangible improvements in employee satisfaction and customer loyalty. One particularly powerful video featured a restaurant owner who had overhauled his workplace policies after attending one of the campaign's workshops. "When I started treating my staff like people instead of numbers, everything changed," he said. "Happy employees make for happy customers. It's not rocket science. It's common sense." The videos went viral, effectively neutralizing much of the backlash and reaffirming the campaign's purpose. A personal revelation. Amid the whirlwind of public appearances and strategic planning, Melinda found herself grappling with a deeper, more personal question. What had she truly learned from her journey? While she had dedicated herself to helping others, she realized she had yet to fully process her own trauma. One evening, as she sorted through the ever-growing pile of letters from supporters, she came across a handwritten note from a former coworker, a flight attendant she hadn't spoken to since her dismissal. "Melinda, I followed your story from the beginning, and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. But I also want to remind you to take care of yourself. You've been through so much, and while you're doing amazing work, you deserve healing too. With love, Sophia." The note hit her like a wave. Melinda realized she had been so focused on advocating for others that she had neglected her own mental and emotional well-being. That night, she reached out to a therapist, beginning the long overdue process of unpacking the pain, anger, and guilt she had carried since her dismissal. Building bridges. As Melinda worked on herself, she also sought to bridge the gap between workers and businesses. She and Barron organized a national summit, bringing together service workers, corporate leaders, labor advocates, and policymakers. The event, dubbed the Service Solidarity Summit, aimed to foster dialogue and identify actionable solutions. The first day of the summit was tense. Workers shared harrowing stories of mistreatment, while executives defended their policies, often citing the pressures of profitability. But by the second day, a shift occurred. Facilitated discussions revealed common ground. Both sides wanted sustainable, successful businesses, and both recognized the value of a motivated, respected workforce. One breakthrough moment came during a session led by Clara Peterson. She recounted a story about a young flight attendant who had nearly quit after being berated by a passenger. She stayed because her team rallied around her, Clara said, her voice cracking. Support makes all the difference, and that's what we need. Systems that support, not punish. The room erupted in applause. By the end of the summit, several companies had pledged to pilot new employee support programs, while labor advocates committed to working with businesses to find mutually beneficial solutions. A monumental step forward. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Humanity in Service achieved its most significant milestone yet, the passage of the Fair Work Practices Act. The legislation, shaped in part by Melinda's testimony and the campaign's advocacy, introduced measures to protect workers from unreasonable demands, provide access to mental health resources, and ensure fair treatment across industries. The bill's signing ceremony was a surreal moment for Melinda. Standing on the steps of the Capitol, surrounded by her team, she felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't thought possible a year ago. As reporters swarmed her with questions, she smiled and said, "This is just the beginning. There's still so much work to do, but today we've taken a step toward a world where everyone's humanity is valued." A new chapter. With the campaign now a global movement, Melinda began to step back from the day-to-day operations. She had spent so much time fighting for others that she realized it was time to focus on her own growth. She returned to writing, publishing a memoir titled More Than One Mistake: My Journey from Flight Attendant to Advocate. The book became a bestseller, not just for its gripping narrative, but for its powerful message of resilience and redemption. Readers connected with her story, finding inspiration in her ability to turn adversity into action. Melinda also took up public speaking, traveling the world to share her experiences and encourage others to advocate for themselves and their communities. Every stage she stepped onto, every room she entered, felt like another step toward reclaiming the life she thought she had lost. Full circle. One sunny afternoon, Melinda found herself back at an airport, this time not as a flight attendant but as a traveler. As she boarded the plane, she couldn't help but smile. The flight crew moved gracefully through the cabin, their professionalism a testament to the industry she had once loved and helped improve. As the plane soared into the sky, Melinda gazed out the window, reflecting on how far she had come. She was no longer defined by the mistake that had once consumed her. Instead, she was defined by her courage, her determination, and the lives she had touched along the way. For the first time in years, Melinda felt truly free. Legacy of change. A year after the passage of the Fair Work Practices Act, Melinda Walker stood on a stage at the first Humanity in Service Global Conference. The event was being held in Geneva, Switzerland, a testament to how far the movement had spread. Delegates from over 50 countries filled the massive hall, including service workers, corporate leaders, government officials, and nonprofit advocates. The room buzzed with energy as Melinda adjusted the microphone, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "When this journey started, I never imagined it would bring us here. What began as a personal struggle has become a global mission to ensure that every worker, everywhere, is treated with dignity and respect." The audience erupted into applause, but Melinda wasn't finished. Today isn't just about celebrating our progress. It's about looking forward. The world of work is evolving, and we have the power to shape that evolution into something that benefits everyone. As she stepped away from the podium, Melinda felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't thought possible, but she also knew the work was far from over. A movement beyond borders. The global conference was a turning point for humanity in service. The organization transitioned from focusing solely on individual industries to addressing systemic inequities across sectors. It launched initiatives to combat wage theft, ensure parental leave for service workers, and advocate for universal access to mental health resources. Melinda, while still the face of the movement, had begun to take on a more strategic role. She worked closely with her team to identify regions where the movement's impact could be expanded. From rural communities in India to bustling cities in Brazil, the stories of workers shared striking similarities: long hours, low wages, and little recognition. In response, Humanity in Service formed regional coalitions, partnering with local organizations to tailor solutions to each area's unique challenges. This decentralized approach allowed the movement to grow organically, driven by the voices of the workers it aimed to support. Personal growth and reflection. Despite the growing success of the movement, Melinda remained grounded in her own journey. Therapy had become an integral part of her life, helping her confront not just the trauma of her dismissal, but also the deeper insecurities she had carried for years. Through her sessions, she realized that her perfectionism had been both a strength and a weakness. It had driven her to excel in her career, but it had also made her fear failure to an almost paralyzing degree. Learning to embrace imperfection was an ongoing process, but one she faced with courage and determination. Melinda also reconnected with parts of her life she had neglected. She joined a local book club, rediscovered her love for painting, and even began mentoring young professionals entering the service industry. These moments of normalcy became a sanctuary amidst the chaos of her public life. A surprising reconciliation. One day, Melinda received an email that stopped her in her tracks. It was from the CEO of the airline that had fired her. "Dear Ms. Walker, I've been following the work you've done through Humanity in Service, and I must admit, it's impressive. I'd like to apologize for how we handled your dismissal. It was a difficult decision at the time, but I realize now that it could have been handled with more compassion. If you're open to it, I'd like to discuss potential ways we can collaborate to improve conditions for our employees." Melinda stared at the screen, her emotions a whirlwind of vindication, anger, and curiosity. Part of her wanted to ignore the message, but another part recognized the opportunity. After taking a day to reflect, she replied, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm open to a conversation. Let's set up a meeting." When they finally met, the CEO was candid about the airline's shortcomings and expressed a genuine interest in reform. Together, they worked on a pilot program aimed at improving employee training and support. The program, aptly named Fly with Empathy, became a model for the industry. For Melinda, the collaboration was more than a professional milestone. It was a personal victory, a chance to reclaim the narrative that had once been taken from her. A new generation of leaders. As the movement grew, so did the number of people stepping up to lead. Melinda began mentoring a core group of advocates who brought fresh perspectives and energy to the campaign. One of them, a former barista named Lila, had a knack for rallying young workers and organizing grassroots events. Another, an outspoken retail manager named Carlos, used his platform to push for policy changes at major corporations. Melinda watched with pride as these leaders carried the torch, expanding the movement in ways she hadn't imagined. "Do you ever feel like they're outgrowing us?" Barron asked one evening as they reviewed the latest campaign metrics. Melinda laughed. "That's the goal, isn't it? To build something that doesn't rely on one person." Barron nodded. "You've done something incredible, Melinda. You've given people hope and a voice." The legacy solidified. Years later, Melinda found herself standing in a classroom at a prestigious university. She had been invited to deliver a guest lecture on leadership and advocacy. As she looked out at the eager faces of the students, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. "What's the most important lesson you've learned?" a student asked during the Q&A session. Melinda paused, considering her answer. That failure isn't the end, she said finally. It's an opportunity. What defines us isn't the mistakes we make. It's how we choose to grow from them. The room erupted in applause, and Melinda couldn't help but smile. A quiet reflection. That evening, back in her cozy apartment, Melinda sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights stretched out before her, a tapestry of endless possibilities. Her phone buzzed with updates from the campaign. But for once, she let it be. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the humiliation, the uncertainty, the hard-fought victories. She thought about the people she had met along the way, the lives she had touched, and the movement that had become bigger than she ever dreamed. Melinda wasn't just the woman who had been fired for denying water to a passenger. She was a leader, an advocate, and a symbol of resilience. Her story had become a testament to the power of transformation, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was always a chance to rise again. As she sipped her tea, a sense of peace washed over her. Her legacy was secure, but more importantly, so was her hope for the future. She closed her eyes and smiled, ready for whatever came next.